Hey guys, it's Nick. Welcome to another episode of T-365. If you're a vendor or MSP struggling with GDAP and GDAP architecture as it relates to your automations, stay tuned because in this video, I'm going to cover the high-level architecture for GDAP as it relates to automation activity across multiple tenants. And additionally, I'm going to share a script with you that goes through, helps with change management if you were to add additional APIs or scope to your automations over time as well too, and how that ripples across to all the customers that you do have a GDAP relationship with. So I have some blog posts that I've wrote before that talk about this automation that I'll link below, but a lot of us experienced this more heavily when we switched into GDAP because it broke a lot of our automations, and that's primarily what I've written about in the past. Now getting into more of the high-level architecture here before we pop into some more of the problem statements and some of the things that I've scripted for you here as well from the standpoint of remediation, is just getting into this architecture. So when we think about what we have today, we have our Entra ID tenant, and that's our internal tenant as an MSP. And when we create an automation, we're setting up what's known as an app registration, also known as a service principal, and that is what we're using as basically a managed identity, if you will, in order to call or scope APIs that we want to request in our tenant, but then extends into multi-tenant environments, which I'll get into here in a second. So this is our app registration, that we set up within the app registration section within Entra. And from here, we're just saying these are the API scopes that it has access to. And so the API scopes just relate to the permissions necessary to call the APIs from Microsoft, the Graph APIs, and this is all linked in their documentation. So you may have permissions that say user.read, you can read users within the tenant. You might have devices.read-write, and so forth. So it just keeps going here with the amount of scope that you can derive, and that's all the APIs that you want to do for your particular automation. Now, the other best recommendation here, as far as the best practice goes, is that you're also setting up a service account specific to your integration or automation as well. And so this is recommended because you need to get or garner some type of access token in order to call these APIs. And generally speaking, it should be a global admin role, but you don't want this to be associated to a regular licensed user within the tenant that accesses email and those types of things. And ideally, this could be a PIM enabled user so that you can only activate, or you do only activate, the global admin rights at the time in which you're consenting to get your tokens for authentication against this automation. So you're reducing your attack surface in that way as well too. Now when we think about the architecture in which we need to start to garner the consent for our automation within our downstream tenants, one of the first things that we need to do here is within Entra, we first need to set them up or add them at the service account, that is, to the admin agents group. That's tied into Microsoft Entra as well too, because that's one of the basic prerequisites. It gets us access into some of the downstream customers in our environment. Now when we take a look at this as well, we're looking at our Microsoft Partner Center environment being directly connected into our Active Directory there as well too. So the user management all kind of flows through there. And of course within Partner Center, we have access to all of our customers. Now we went ahead and we got the relationships granted with these customers either through converting or through net new relationships with GDAP. So GDAP is associated to every single one of these customers, and with GDAP there's a bit of a nested relationship as far as establishing that overall architecture. Many of us are familiar with this now, but we go ahead and we crush the GDAP relationship with our customers, and in that GDAP relationship we're defining the roles in which we need access into. So those could be things like user administrator, could be things like team administrator, and it could be things like exchange administrator. And then, as most of you know now as well too, that's not your final step. You do need to go ahead and assign these relationships to a particular security group. And so when we look at that, you might have a security group in here. And let's just say you have 2 for now, but typically you're segregating those against your tier 1 support versus your tier 2 support, where when you add the security group as far as the assignment goes, you may just be adding something as far as the roles that relate to their basic day-to-day responsibilities, like doing a lot of password resets, so maybe the user administrator role, whereas in SG2, they might have more of an elevated role like Exchange admin because they're doing more work there. And this was the fundamental premise behind GDAP and starting to partition out those roles to reduce our attack surface and promote a model of least privilege as well too. So one of the things that we have to take in consideration with the automation is there's some basic prerequisite steps. So one of which is that the service account that we need in order to facilitate this consent of our automation or app registration up here does have to be part of one of these security groups that's assigned to the GDAP relationship or to the customer as part of that GDAP relationship. Now, one of the prerequisites, this is Microsoft's documentation that you get into, and this is where we get into some layers of complexity, is that in order to facilitate, a kind of a consent model, we have to take some additional steps. So previously, when we had DAP, or delegated access permissions, that previous relationship with our customers that allowed us to manage them, we had something known as pre-consent. And this was basically saying, with this relationship in place, you have global administrative rights over your downstream tenants. So we were able to call access tokens against them with that relationship being set up with really no impediments on what we could do because we had global admin rights in general. So now when we talk about this new model with GDAP, we have to leverage something new to say, I can grant consent into the customers that I manage. And this is known now as the CPV API. So this is available to partners, but it's basically saying, I want to basically formulate a request for the app registration that I have, and I want to send kind of more of a consent process down to my customers with this thing in place, or with these artifacts in place as well. So with the CPV API, the prerequisite that you have to have here is that the service account and the associated security group that it's part of has to have access into one of 3 different roles within Microsoft. Now, by the time you're watching this may have changed, but I'll link below a blog post that details all of this, and I'll update that over time as well too. But these 3 roles are global admin, privileged role admin, and then cloud app admin. And generally speaking, Microsoft's recommending that you don't add global admin. It's best practice, especially with the implications of GDAP. But when we have these and we have them associated to the security group, we can then make the CPV request, which sends over this body of permissions that we're requesting in our customer tenant. And we go ahead and run this against the app registration. So we give them the ID of the app registration, and then we also give it the tenant ID of our customer in the API call with this request. And as long as you fulfilled these basic prerequisites of having, the service account in which we generated the access token, the correct permissions in the security group, we get a 200 success message here when we make the request, and then we can start to call the API against our tenants as well too. So that's kind of the fundamental basic premise of how this begins. But one of the things that I've come across recently, which is the purpose of the script that I'm going to show you later on in this video, is that whenever you have an app, especially if you're a vendor as well, you're going to scope this with the API permissions in a model of least privilege, ideally. When you set this up, you're going to maybe add permissions over time, and there might be new APIs that come out, honestly, for Microsoft that you want to add as well here too. And so what I found is that if you, for say I want to add the user read-write capability or permission scope to this, now you've introduced a new scope to what you've already pre-consented to, and it doesn't automatically just flow through and you can start calling that against your customers. You do have to take additional steps. Now, if you have the global admin role in place associated to this particular security group that you have over here, then you're able to just revoke and re-add consent. There's a specific API to revoke the consent. There's no patch for this right now as of this recording, but then you go ahead and re-add it with the additional body of this user read write all that you've added into that body, and then that customer will then have access and you don't run into any complications. But if we look at a different example where maybe we haven't scoped the global admin role, but maybe we've scoped just these two, privileged role admin or cloud app admin, we try to go make a patch request, let's say with our automation, because we just added that user read write role. We say, I want to go ahead and patch this user's first name, and I want to go do that against this particular customer. So if I'm, as part of the service account that I use to set it up, if I'm part of this group and I only have access to these two Azure AD roles, I'm actually going to get denied through making that request. I'm going to get an authorization denied message from Microsoft because technically I don't have any rights here as far as a role goes to be able to update a user. So what I have to do in this particular use case is I have to go into Partner Center and I have to go ahead and add this relationship down to this security group, and then I'll be able to make this particular call after I revoke and re-add consent again. So just take note that this is another step that you have to take afterwards. But if you think about that, if you have hundreds of customers, then you have to go into every single customer, every single GDAP relationship and add a particular role as long as it's part of the existing GDAP relationship roles that you added originally. So it's a huge amount of overhead. It could take you hundreds of hours just for making a single request here that you wanted to do. So what my script that I wrote does, that I'll share with you guys here, and I'll show you that here in a few minutes, is that it simply goes in and it grabs all GDAP relationships, it takes in your group ID that you want to add it to, so your security group, plus the role ID. I can show you guys how to get that for what you want to add, and then it just loops through and it adds that role to all the access assignments. So it's effectively taking this very manual process and just automating that whole thing, in general. Now, the asterisk or the caveat here is that you do have to have that role available as part of your original GDAP relationship. So it's got to be included in the original scope when you go request that relationship for your customers. And so if it's not, this isn't going to work because you manually, then there's no workaround. You have to manually go add that relationship for your customers. So if you're an MSP, getting new GDAP relationships, or if you're a vendor educating MSPs on the GDAP relationships you should set, it should be recommended that even if they're not necessarily assigning all of the roles today within these security groups, you should likely add them as part of the GDAP relationship outside of maybe global admin, so that you could potentially add over time when it comes to drift, and in those senses as well too. So this is, fundamentally highly confusing. I definitely recognize that based off of all the configuration that you have to do, but wanted to introduce it just to give more of a visual behind what's all going on here. And obviously there's a lot more documentation that'll just supplement below on this as well. But this is fundamentally kind of some of the challenges with GDAP that we have now. We are a lot more secure in these senses, but it brings a lot more complexity. Now you could avoid basically the secondary half of what I mentioned by adding global admin into your relationships that are assigned to these security groups, but that's kind of breaking the model that we want to have with GDAP and the security enhancements that it's bringing here as well. It's a classic combination of sacrificing security over deriving certain efficiencies or having less overhead in those ways in order to perform those particular tasks. So again, if you're a vendor this is what you have to educate your customer on in the sense of the MSP as well, because the same configuration will be applicable. If your API calls are failing against their GDAP relationships, it's likely because you don't have the correct permissions associated to that GDAP relationship for the customer. So all that said, I'm going to dive in now and show you the script that I wrote, some of the items, within Partner Center, just to give you more of a visual there as well too, and then we'll kind of close out after that. Okay, so before we get into the script, I just want to reference my original article on this because of the amount of volume of requests that I got whenever GDAP first came out, and just talking about how your automations are breaking or why they're breaking, and then these are the fundamental steps through setting up secure application model, which is SAM, which is the automation that I spoke of there as I went through that on the whiteboard. But additionally, it talks about the API calls for the consent API that I talked about as well too. So it's very verbose in the sense of all the detail and the screenshots of the things that you're doing in Partner Center. That kind of covers most of the original documentation that I talked about in the sense of just automation and GDAP in general. And then from here, I have this new article that I'll be publishing as well, which includes kind of more of that problem statement of when we have drift over time, we want to add new API permissions. How do we go about validating that against our customers? And if we do have to make updates to the role assignments that we have for our customers, how can I fully script that as well too? So there's kind of a cross-reference between the two articles here. I list out all the GDAP APIs that I'm leveraging and some of the logic behind this particular script as well too, which is really just getting an access token and defining those group IDs or role IDs that you're going to be leveraged. And then you're looping through kind of all the GDAP relationships, finding the ones that don't have the role that you need as part of the access assignments and the group where your service principal lives, and then just updating them as well here too. When you run the script, you'll either get an error message or success, and it'll list the tenant ID of which it's exceeded. In likely scenarios, is in the sense that it's failing, it's likely that the role itself that you're trying to apply is not actually part of the GDAP relationship that you established. So going back to that, that's kind of the situation in which you have to go ahead and request a new relationship with the customer. Lastly, here kind of closing the loop, some visuals in Partner Center to give you more of that front end experience. In the customer section, you have this administer section, which includes all of the customers you have a GDAP relationship with. So but prior to the script that I'm writing here, the fundamental thing that you'd have to be going and doing here is saying, I'm going into this customer to look at their relationship. I'm clicking on the relationship, and then I'm going in and seeing the security groups here, and I'm going and I'm adding, the necessary permissions for that particular group or, the role that I want to assign here. So maybe I want to assign, they want a device write capability. So I want to add Intune administrator. I have to come in and I have to add that, and then I have to go save it as well too, which is really, quite cumbersome as far as just getting that set up and established as well. And then you have to do that against every single one of your customers for the permissions that you do need. So this is what the script is going in and automating based off the variables that you put in. So that's everything that I wanted to showcase for you guys today. Definitely like and subscribe if you guys want to see more content around Microsoft and the MSP space. Additionally, leave any questions or comments about this video. You might have some more because it's more confusing in the sense of the actual architecture, but I'm happy to help as well. Thanks, guys. I'll see you next week.